So, today we go back to our little tier list, and this time we will talk about the US tech tree. Let's start with a mandatory reminder on how I classify the vehicles in the tier list, since it's the first tier list of this nation. I focus on parameters like their stats, of course, which means armor, penetration values, armaments, mobility, the stock and ace experience, if they have a lineup to work with, their BR placement, which means what kind of opponents they'll face on the battlefield, etc. Now with the details out of the way, let's get started with rank 1. The first vehicle on our list today is the M2A4. The M2A4 is a very fast, poorly armored light tank and a very good introduction to how you should play US light tanks in general. The lack of armor of this vehicle is compensated by the fact that the gun is stabilized. Remember that the stabilizer only works up to a certain speed though, letting you shoot your opponent first even while on the move. Your only good ammo, however, is AP, so it might take a few shots to kill your target. Overall, a decent B tier light tank. The two following tanks of that line are quite similar to each other, and also very similar to the M2A4. The M3 and M3A1 Stuart are basically just an upgraded version of the M2A4. They have better armor or slightly higher penetration, but in the end they play pretty much the same. Since there are no major changes, the M3 will also sit in B tier, however the M3A1 variant will go in C for the sole reason of not having a lineup at BR 2.3. Next up we have the first medium tank of the tech tree, the M2. This tank is honestly pretty good if played correctly. You see, the M2 has the same firepower as the M3 Stuart. However, this tank has a lot more armor and way more crew members. In other words, your survivability suddenly skyrockets. The only issue is that the M2's armor is only really effective when angled. If you are a new player and know nothing about angling, you might struggle a bit to make it work properly, especially since this tank is not without drawbacks. It has a pretty bad reverse speed and a horrendous turret rotation rate. In conclusion, a very good tank if you master the core concepts of the game and know where to position yourself. Even without being a master at the game, I'd say it's still a worthy tank to play, B tier as well. We now move on to another light tank line, and the first one is an amphibious vehicle, the LVT-A1. This tank will go straight in A tier. You might be wondering how a tank ginormous like this one can be considered a light tank. The fact is, despite the size, the tank is mostly empty and is only 2 tons heavier than the Stuart. That also means that this monstrosity is quite nimble with a top speed of 40 km an hour. The reverse speed, however, is still trash. The LVT relies entirely on its empty interior space to survive most shots. Since you don't have a lot of armor and barely any internal components, most shots will go straight through your armor without dealing too much damage or will just overpen. Your crew members are also spread across the entirety of the tank, and both inside and outside the vehicle, making you pretty durable. Unless an enemy is using a very powerful high explosive shell, it's almost impossible for you to lose all your crew at once. Last but not least, your gun is stabilized and has decent penetration power. If you want some fun, I highly recommend playing this one. Next up, we have a classic meme vehicle of War Thunder, the M22 Locust. Memes aside, the M22 is basically a Stuart, but smaller and faster. The trade-off for that speed is, as per usual, a weaker armor and less crew members, 3 instead of 4. The M22 is a rat tank, and should be played as such. Sitting at the same BR as the M3, you have a choice for your light tank selection. Slightly more survivability with the M3 Stuart, or you go full on speed and power with the M22. Still a good light tank that you will see way past Beyond 2.0, but not really because of its stats. This one will go in B tier. We now arrive at the SPAA line with the M13. Personally, I'm a huge fan of half-tracks, and in general, low-tier half-tracks are pretty good. The M13 is a very strong anti-aircraft vehicle. It carries 2 heavy machine guns, able to pilot snipe easily or trigger fires in the enemy planes. It boasts a very good rate of fire, making it fairly easy to adjust your aim on the fly, and its belt is powerful enough to kill many light tanks at this BR. The mobility also allows you to pretty much act as a light tank if you want to. A very good SPAA which will go straight in A tier. The brother of the M13 and sitting at the same BR is the M15. This one is mighty ugly, but instead of carrying just 2 heavy machine guns for anti-air duty, carries an additional 37mm autocannon with enough penetration to kill most light tanks frontally and any other tanks if they expose their sight to you. Compared to the M13, you have more crew members, but this time that doesn't mean that you are more survivable. Having an additional gun means carrying more ammo and, well, it's placed all over the turret. You also have a way slower turret rotation speed, which can make the hunt for planes more challenging. This SPAA is in the end a bit of a hybrid. I will still put it in A tier because it's quite powerful, but if you really want to focus on plane shooting, the M13 might be easier to handle. The last line of rank 1 is the Tank Destroyer line. However, the first vehicle of this line can hardly fit this role. The M2A2 is just 2 machine guns strapped on a tank chassis, and only one of them is a heavy machine gun. In other words, you have a worse M13 but designed to kill tanks. The problem is, you still have the same penetration as the M13, which is primarily an anti-air vehicle. As soon as you come across something with slightly more armor, you pretty much can do anything to it. I highly recommend you avoid playing this vehicle, especially since you have other alternatives at the same BR. You guessed it, this one will go straight in D tier. The M8 HMC, however, is a B tier tank destroyer. This one is a very fast howitzer shooting either HE or HEAT, both work really, and which has a heavy machine gun on top. The mobility paired with a decent firepower makes it a very good tank destroyer and very easy to play. The only downside might be the low shell velocity, making long-range shots a bit difficult for beginners, or the slightly longer reload compared to other vehicles at this BR. The last vehicle on our list today is probably the best you can find at rank 1, the M3 GMC. This tank destroyer is a bully. It carries a very powerful 75mm gun, which can one-shot anything, whether it is an up tier or a down tier. To put things into perspective, the caliber and ammunition used by this vehicle can still be found on tanks at BR 5.7. This should be enough to convince you about the effectiveness of this gun at 1.7. Firepower aside, you are a half-track chassis, which means good mobility and speed. You have 5 crew members, making one-shotting you pretty hard, a decent reload speed, and your lack of armor also makes overpans quite frequent. The only thing you should fear are vehicles using HE shells. Since you are an open-top vehicle, they can easily destroy you. Other than that, a very good vehicle even when stock, and one of my personal favorites. 8 years straight away. That concludes the ranking of the rank 1 vehicles for the US. As you can see, you don't have many bad vehicles, most of them are above average, which is a trend for the US tech tree. Most tanks in there don't shine in any specific department. Most of them are just well balanced. Anyway, I hope this ranking will be useful for some of you. Let me know if you agree or disagree with this list, and with that said, I'll see you in the next one.